Yeah, I think we've started on a very good note. I think I will be able to meet the expectation that has been set with various speeches, the keynote speech, the welcome address, Professor Williams' initial presentation. But I think what I will be doing in the next 15, 20 minutes is to discuss the cross around. I think it discuss when we think about these projects. And, as researchers, you want to do new things. And I think two of the new things is around the behavioral and the gender perspective. I mean, to really think about what new can we really add to that aspect. But, one problem is that you need new things doesn't mean you have solved the old problem, right? And that's why we also say, okay, let's assess the state of things in the procurement sector. Let's look at the transparency. Let's look at the skills. We know these are really, really old issues that over the years, I mean, we have all discussed about the 2007 World Bank report, and I think some of what it highlighted is the issue of transparency. Another issue is the issue of skills gap, and that led to the establishment of these schools and training and procurement. So those are the issues. But what we have not done is have we really evaluated what the progress is? Have we seen loopholes in the system that we need to? Because now we are currently discussing procurement reform again. The president has just constituted a committee to do that. So what are the kind of inputs that we need to really think about the process in procurement? That's actually why we added these two components around transparency and skill gaps into this research work. But let me also say that the purpose of our work, of the research we're doing, it's not yet, I won't call it a final product. So we also still want you to give feedbacks that we can actually use to improve our work, right? So in a way, we are just really presenting to you our drafted work, whereby we solicit feedbacks to further improve it. So in a way, your feedback is quite needed at this point in time. So my presentation will be around transparency, procurement process in Nigeria, transparency and skill gap. And while we are waiting for the slide, in my slide, one of the questions I really want you to think about is when you think about procurement process in Nigeria, what comes to your mind, right? I know most of us are procurement experts, so you might think about bidding, contract. But as a typical Nigerian, what do we think when people hear about public procurement? I think one of the signs, let me go. So if you look at my presentation, I look at newspaper analysis. And so here, what you see is actually when public, most times when they hear about public procurement, so when they hear about public procurement, most times, one of the first one that comes to mind is corruption, right? And you see there, this is by EFCC chairman, Nigeria lost about 2.9 trillion to contract procurement from within 2 years, right? And I mean, in another news, you had someone talking about the failure of the 2007 Procurement Act. I think many people believe that is outdated. Fiscal transparency, despite ICT advancement, Nigerian state open contracting portals inaccessible. We will hear from that. But I mean, so the story here is this. In terms of the narratives, and I think we set the conversation here about the narrative, that the narrative around procurement is that it is bad, it is corrupted. That's the narrative. Part of the narrative is actually a problem of transparency, right? Even if you are doing something very well, if it's not transparent, anybody can interpret it anyway. So transparency is actually crucial in how we form the narrative. That's actually the point I want to make. But one of the statistics tells us about the level of procurement in Nigeria currently. First, let me put a caveat that we don't know. We don't know what the state of procurement in terms of data. People do things, but we don't have a statistics that show whether this procurement is good or bad. But we can actually interpret it from indirectly. So one of the parties, when you look at budget openness, and why we look at this as maybe a kind of measure of procurement transparency itself, is the fact that, don't forget that procurement is also part of the budgeting process, right? I would argue that it is when budgeting process ends, procurement now starts, right? When you do all this approval, now let's implement the budget. And if you look at here, tracking what has happened in Nigeria based on data that is available between 2006 and 2021, we could see when compared to, say, a country like South Africa, look at what we scored. We are about currently, latest data, I think they will release their 2023 data very soon. But when you see 2021, 45, South Africa, 68, that shows improvement over time in our budget transparency or openness, but we are still lacking. What these indicators actually advocated for is that if you are 61, if you score 61 points, you are really doing well. So we are still less than 61. So which means we have not gotten. Now, this is important for many things. When you look at public procurement, and let me go to the next slide where we disaggregated this number. So this is just a disaggregation of the number you just saw. And you see that budget openness consists of three things: budget transparency, public participation, and budget oversight. Where do we have some of the big problems in Nigeria? Number one is around the public participation, right? In terms of oversight, you could see we are already at 61 according to the most recent data, right? A lot of people can argue maybe the oversight is weak or not, but there is, right? But in terms of where the two challenges are is budget transparency and public participation. If you look at this data, if you check the data, this is actually very comprehensive that anybody could look. If you look at where the challenge was identified for Nigeria around budget transparency. So we have budgets. It is released publicly, right? Everybody knows about the budget. But you know that where our budgeting problem lies is two areas. Number one, we don't actually have an audited report of our budget to know that what extent as what we have actually promised that we would do, to what extent was it actually carried out. And the auditing process is actually about the procurement process. So that's actually what this index is saying the biggest problem lies. So you could see that transparency sometimes around our procurement process, especially at the federal level. We were looking for the budgets recently on actual government spending in Nigeria. And you won't get the data. The latest one that was released by Budget Office was the first quarter of 2023. Right? The problem with that is if the data are not timely, even if this is released, they could say, we are releasing this data. It's not timely enough. So you couldn't be actually saying, government is, because you need the timely data to actually get into the conversation. So we'll be discussing something for, it's already like about 18 months late in some instances before we get the release of that data. Those are part of the problem. The second part of the problem is public participation, which is the lowest area. And I want to emphasize that we cannot really make progress. When you talk about public procurement and budgeting, we can differentiate it. For example, in budgeting, we have legislative oversight. So what's the oversight at the procurement level, right? Most times, you actually see, if the citizens are the beneficiary of this, maybe they could also be part of the oversight process. But in Nigeria, the weakest point is actually citizen participation. So that's a problem in our procurement. If it's not transparent to the citizen, again, the narrative is formed around the story you had about what is going on in the Nigerian procurement process. This is actually just a similar point. Even when what are the things that we can use to really improve oversight? Judiciary independence, administrative burden, e-citizenship, press freedom. You could see that the weakest, this is another index that shows various things. where the biggest challenges is also around e-citizenship, whereby citizen engagement in that process. And again, that points to the fact that if they are the one that we expect oversight to come from, there is a problem, right? And if there's a problem here, the narrative that will still be out there is that there's inefficiency and there's corruption. So part of the reform process, I mean, the first thing to put on the table is part of our reform process or initiative in Nigeria. Whatever we think about it, how do we actually bring more citizen participation in that process should be crucial. We've not done that effectively in the past. So this research is literally to look at all of that. What are the factors driving transparency in public procurement? What are the effectiveness of recent reforms? And what are the challenges to achieving optimal transparency in the procurement process? How did we go about the research? We focused on 3 places: federal system, Ekiti State, and Kaduna State. Why Ekiti and Kaduna State? When anytime we talked about procurement and say you want to learn about procurement system in Nigeria, everybody keeps telling us go to Kaduna and Ekiti State. So we said, okay, we have to just deal with that. Right. So then the federal system, that was added to it. So what we did is we spoke with MDAs in both in each of these ones. We also actually then. So one of what we did, which you will hear more in terms of what are the challenges, is the fact that we spoke with people that participated in the contracting process, bidding and everything, and they highlighted some of the weaknesses still existing in that process. Our emphasis is on, when we did this work, we look at we look at the various value chain. From approval to bidding to the disclosure of bidding criteria to the dispute resolution, all of this we look into to see what are the transparency elements that we really want to emphasize and what are the challenges that bidders are highlighting as key weaknesses still existing in that area. So I will quickly go into looking at each of these in terms of what the engagement reveals. Number one is the approval of procurement contracts. And I think most of us will be used to this. This is like the threshold for approval, right? Which one go to the Federal Executive Council or the State Executive Council? Which one can the Commissioner of Ministerial Tender approve? Which one lies with the board? Which one accounting officer or permanent secretary? Which one can the director approve? What you will see here is the fact that this has done, the transparency element here is that the bigger the amount of money involved, the more checks and balances. So if it is less than 10 million for goods and services, of course, director could work on it. But when it becomes 300 million or more, no, it has to go to the highest authority. That's actually a part of ensuring that we introduce enough checks and balances. But also, in a way, it's maybe to also cater for experiences and maybe SMEs inclusion. So, for example, with the lower bids, SMEs can participate. With also, you don't want to buy stationaries or tissue paper, and you want it to go to the State Executive Council before the approval for that. You want nobody will wait for that, right? So you want that to be done. But what are the issues that were highlighted? 2 issues. One is piecemeal projects, whereby sometimes I think a lot of people have talked about the disadvantage in the present procurement system, whereby it slows things down. We might want to move faster than what the procurement law says. I think there's a recent conversation that Minister Wiki mentioned that they needed to fast track things in the procurement law for them to acquire technology. They kidnap someone. You want to rescue them, but if you are going to rely on procurement law, maybe you are still looking for that equipment in the next 9 months. And the kidnappers will not wait until that point in time. So so we also see that people have actually really said, okay, how can we achieve this? Even if something is 300 million, you can actually make it how many projects? As small project that can be approved at the lower level, than the higher level. So those kind of piecemeal kind of projects, splitting projects into pieces in order to make sure that we don't violate the threshold, but we still meet that process. It's both good and bad. So in a way, you can use it to those kind of problems that we encounter, you can use it to solve it. But it's also an avenue for someone to actually also exploit that, right? So what we should be looking at our procurement reform is how do we really address those issues? It's a valid point because it can delay progress, but also it's also a valid point that it can also be a loophole. So how do we really address it? That's the issues we should be talking about, and that relates to the second point in terms of issue of timeliness and efficiency. Like procurement law is creating a trade-off between efficiency of project delivery and also the timeliness. You want to do something in 1 month, procurement law says you couldn't do it for 4 months. And in the old era where we have our budgets mostly being passed around June, it means that you cannot actually do anything. Some people argue that that's even an opportunity for corruption. If you don't do anything, so what do you do with the money that has been? So they've given you this money now, and you can't return it. So what do you do with it? We know the cases of, I think, Professor Grange. I think that's actually around procurement in terms of delay. So those are kind of loopholes that we need to be thinking about in our subsequent reform process. What about the next stage? I mean, the first stage of procurement is advertisement of procurement bids, and we are obligated to actually announce the bids. I mean, the call for bids in 2 national newspapers. For example, at the federal level, we have the Federal Tender Journal, ensuring that this is, I mean, everybody's informed. I mean, the essence of this is also transparency. To make sure that if there is a bid you want to announce to the public, I mean, you want people to come and bid for something, let everybody be aware. If everybody is aware, so what are we likely to have? We are going to have a transparent system. And I think the case of announcement, I think it's generally something that is being conformed to. When we spoke with even people that are bidding, the people who are implementing projects in Kaduna State and Ekiti State, they were aware of various forms of approaches that it has taken. For example, in Kaduna, they mentioned that there's a national dailies and there's a e-procurement website whereby the announcements is made and they could actually be aware of it. In Ekiti State, people talk about newspaper, radio jingles, online platform as part of what has been done. So what are the challenges that people mentioned? Some of the challenges they talked about is sometimes you might actually announce a bid in 2 weeks, like you have to bid in 2 weeks' time, right? It takes time to actually prepare bids. Sometimes a bid could be as expected of maybe the document you need could be run into hundreds or 150. That takes time. So if you give very short time notice for applications, right, it's not going to help a lot of people that have, maybe when we even talk about gender, women organization that has limited capacity. So when we have short bids, it's actually tend to help people that are already in the system rather than helping new people that you really want to. I mean, if you're already in the system, you have all these documents, you know all these procedures, those are things that you could be prepared for. If you're not in the system, it's not possible. And so those are part of the problems in terms of how do we address it. And I think the problem is not whether what we are doing is bad or not, but looking at this challenge as a way to think about reforms, right? Should it be a form of education such that anybody that's interested in bid, these are the documents you should be having prepared, ready to go? Can we also really give them anticipation of, there will be really a procurement announcement at this point in time? For example, you see the budget process, you could see what is there, you could know that, expectedly, this procurement should be coming up in the next 3 or 4 months. So that even there is no announcements now, but everybody's have an anticipation that something is coming, whereby they would be preparing. Also, let them know what they would. So those are kind of things that we see as part of what we could improve in this area in terms of the suggestion we are getting from the bidding strategies. What do we mean? These are, I think we have also highlighted this. Most times we expect, the bidding strategy could be two types. One is the competitive, more of open it up to everyone. Restrictive is to the selective few. Both of them has advantages and disadvantages. When we really restrict ourselves to transparency, we say, okay, competitive bidding is the most advantageous, right? But we also know that restrictive bidding, you don't want to be soliciting for aircraft to bomb terrorists. That would be restrictive bidding, not competitive bidding, right? So everything has, but in terms of competitive bidding, when we spoke with many of the of your clients, I'm talking to the people in the procurement, most of them actually said, okay, yeah, that's open bidding process is usual method in the process of, there's open bidding for everyone. But they did not rule out pseudo or coalition in bidding process, right? A lot of people say that they have the feelings that sometimes you could actually see 10 people bidding for something. Sometimes it might be only one person, sometimes it might just be two people. Which means, let's say you want to bid for something, and you go in with two other ones that are just you yourself, other organization. You can increase your portfolio, but also you are taking the box rather than actually ensuring the principle of transparency. Taking the boxes in terms of, okay, it should not just be one person, so there is not a kind of, so you don't want it to appear that it's only one person, so many people applied at once, whereas it's just only one person still applying. So that would be one problem to look into. It's not something that is easy to solve, right? When we talk about problem in procurement, it's not just on the supply side, it's on the two sides. That problem could be coming from the procurement agency. It could also be coming from the bidders, right? So where the problem lies, you don't know. But we need to understand what the problem is, right? As I will be talking about in terms of what the reform should look like around some of those issues. Disclosure of bidding criteria. I think one of the in what we looked at, most when concerning the discussion of bidding, it varies. But some ministry indicated that both successful and unsuccessful bidders are notified about the outcome of the bidding, whereas other review that only the successful bidders. When we talk to MDAs, majority actually just inform the successful bidders. The unsuccessful ones are not informed. Part of the transparency regulation, according to international or global best practices, is that even if you are not picked, you should know why, right? You should know why your bid failed. So in most cases, we don't adhere to that. So we could really conclude that some of the challenges that procurement system in Nigeria is still lacking regard full disclosure. And this point are an important area to improve transparency. The government should publish the selection criteria for bidding in its contract, and details of the contract award method should be clear and timely. So in a way, the way to actually bring everybody on board in that process is certainly full disclosure, right? And we will talk more dispute resolution. So what happened, for example, there was a recent case in the US. There's a bid for a contract to build NASA jets that would take the astronauts to the moon, right? The bid was between SpaceX and Blue Origin, owned by two billionaires, right? And the bid was won by SpaceX, Elon Musk. And so what happened? The other one, they sued them, right? Until they took them to court. Because it's a huge contract, and if you don't get that contract, that's the head of, the major work in the area. So, but what happens in the case of Nigeria, if that happens, that you are not happy with the person has been selected? We find curiously that across the states, every MDSs, they've not had issue of someone complaining about the bids. So that's really, really strike us as something not really. I mean, someone should be unhappy that I didn't win the bid. So we had some of these private exhibitions. And some of the two complaints they gave us, for example, there's a lack of designated authority to even make complaints. There is no proper channel in terms of how do we really complain to. In cases where the bidder is not selected for a contract, there seems to be no established channel for lodging complaint or seeking recourse, right? Sometimes the channel is not there, but sometimes it is informalized because you don't want to take government to court and then be labeled, right? So there is a problem. I don't know, maybe that's false under behavioral issues, whereby even though you think you have a grievance, but you say, okay, don't let me take them to court because maybe I might not be selected somewhere. But I mean, in the interest of transparency, it's important to actually have a dispute resolution mechanism because in every way, like the Blue Origin issue, when I was reading the story, I heard that immediately that contract was awarded to SpaceX. About 10 staffs from Blue Origin moved to SpaceX because that's the only way their career can advance. So in a way, it just shows you that it matters. I mean, it matters to the livelihood of people. It matters to people's business model. So for that reason, someone needs to actually say, have that satisfaction that I've lost a good fight rather than I've lost because of any other reason, right? So that's that's majorly what we find in terms of the bidding process. What about e-procurement? Again, at the federal level, I think one thing we will see is that states are actually ahead of federal government in e-procurement. So, for example, in Kaduna and Ekiti, they've introduced a lot of this e-procurement process into their system. What about federal government? Federal government approved 1.6 billion, I think, in 2016 to commence the process of e-procurement. However, as we speak, what we have is what is called Nokompo. I mean, the full meaning is around. I mean, it's an online transparency stuff, but it's not e-procurement. It's just like a platform to really say, okay, these are the ongoing projects. When I was preparing for this presentation yesterday, so I deliberately went to the portal again to see can I get procurement for 2023. I couldn't see anything for 2023. I tried a bit 2022, nothing. The earliest I was able to see there is around 2021. So it just shows it's also not timely, right? For it. So in a way, state is doing better from this. And my question is this: how involved? And I think I want to really ask our panelists this question: how involved are states in the new reforms? Because given that states are already ahead of federal government in some areas, one lesson, because I see federation as an experiment, and which is the way it should be. You should not just experiment something at the federal level that affects 200 million people. It's important that you experiment in Kaduna. If it works or fail, we discard it and know this will not work, right? If it's something that is work, we scale it to the federal level. Now we've experimented with some of these reforms at the federal level. How are we going to incorporate all those lessons going forward into the next phase of our reform exercise? I think those are the questions we need to think about. So some of the challenges, which I've highlighted, some insufficient political way to fully implement some of the recommendations or reform, for example. Many aspects, even when we talked about them, we blame a lot of reform process on the 2007 Reform Procurement Act, but very few, we know that many of aspects of that act has not still been implemented. So in a way, it's a question of political will. We still have access to comprehensive of meaningful procurement data. Timeliness is still a problem. I think one of the news items I saw was the fact that, I think if you look at the news I showed you, the third news says that despite ICT advancement, most states still have their procurement portal not accessible. So it's still a problem in terms of accessing data, even in many states. So again, what are the peer learning mechanisms that I think you talked about learning from Ekiti State. Are there a way that it's not just going to be by institutionalizing such that someone will really, really learn? Maybe we need to actually bring Ekiti people into the university system, whereby we have a centralized way that everybody will learn, not just someone that is really aware that there is a progress going on in Ekiti State. Those are kind of things to be thinking about. Political intervention and no role for non-state actors in the system. I think I mentioned this in terms of citizenship role in the process, and why that if we don't get it right, it might be a problem. One problem we also had, this is actually mostly at the federal level. There's a complaint that there is skewed distribution of procurement workers, right? Whereby most of what you see, there is oversupply of procurement to some ministry, undersupply to the ministry. So people actually tend to choose because some procurement, some ministry are better than the other. So, yeah, just so there is also a kind of distribution. On the skill gap, what skills do we think a procurement officer should have? So from the literature, these are some of the skills: technical and project management skills, negotiation skills, communication, analytical skills, ethical skills, and with e-procurement, some digital literacy skills. So what we did in also part of that study is to look at some of this. Currently, we are looking at curriculum from Nigeria, and we're also looking at curriculum elsewhere to see how does our curriculum really supply those skills. But in our engagement, we've looked at the demand for skill for procurement and the supply. The demand in the sense that are people coming to even study from these institutions, right? One is the fact that it's become obvious that we need a specialized procurement institutions in Nigeria. I think you highlighted some of the fact that just imagine with the dollar crisis, if we need to train our procurement officers in the US or in the UK, even in South Africa, that's huge. So it's cheaper to actually do it at home, right? And looking at the fact that procurement talks about something that covers every MDAs. Just imagine the number of MDAs we have at the federal government. At the states, 36 states. That means at least each one will need a procurement officer. So look at how many people we need to actually train. And you can't just train and leave it alone. It has to be continuous, right? There could be new development, there could be new initiative. Also, people will retire, right? And so you need new people to actually bring on board. So those are kind of things. So one of what people complain about is the fact that our procurement officers, we still think them as just accountants. So most times people just, because of accounting skills, but procurement is more about project management. So in a way, we need to actually really, really know that it is a distinct career path rather than I'm an accountant, I know about how finances work. It's a different thing, and really upgrading those things are clear. With the establishment of we have procurement centers that are training people. That has been one of the major developments. But one of what we have from the centers is the fact that even the demand looks to be higher among private sectors. They are even demanding for procurement officers. The private sectors are even showing more interest in it than even public sectors, which shows you that. So what are the problems with why are we not seeing that similar? It's not that public sectors are not there, but the comment is even in terms of more interest, private sector engagement seems to be coming also up. In terms of the supply, there is a lot we can also do. Even I believe there are major issues that supply institutions that are also training could do. They also complain about their own capacity itself. If they really want to train everyone, right? It needs a lot of they need a lot of manpower and also financial capacity. And we should know that these institutions has been donor driven in most parts, right? If we really want to talk about sustainability, we need national kind of ownership of all of that, right? How do we ensure that the process is also continuous. So the idea shouldn't be that procurement is not just a one-shot stuff that you go there, you learn the skills. Things change every time in that process, right? And because of that, we need actually more institutions that can participate in that. I mean, also we need a more continuous training. One of the problems, just to end, one of the problems, I mean, that you see in procurement process in Nigeria is the fact that when you make a law around procurement, right? If, human beings, we are very smart. There's something in the literature, and they call it what is called creative accounting. And what do they mean by creative accounting is the fact that this happened not even in Nigeria, but just imagine that we could do that in Nigeria, and I know we're doing it in Nigeria. So what happened I think it was in the EU, and they had this problem that, okay, our budget, a lot of our budget is, we are not seeing a lot of capital spending, right? Capital spending is too low. So they make a law to say that, okay, 40% of the budget should go into this and 60% into this, right? So, but the problem is people in charge, they have a particular thing in terms of maybe what they want to earn in some ways. So what's changed in most cases will be how they label items rather than the issue of whether, an items that should be capital expenditure in nature. So for example, toilet clothes should be maybe recurrent, right? There's a way you could actually add it under maybe some huge investment that then the label becomes capital. So in a way, you are shifting the labeling rather than actually reform. The idea of creative accounting is this, that if someone wants to steal, public official, it talks about this very minute set of people that really dents the image of the public officials. And if they are really, really interested in it, irrespective of the law, I think, and he also gave us the fact that 60% of procurement, of corruption cases are procurement frauds. So what will happen, right? Which means when we make a law, people find loopholes in the laws and they perpetrate it. So which means one short law will not be enough. That's actually the implication. So let me just talk about, I think this is one part of our work we are doing, which is the biggest problem in procurement reform in Nigeria is the political side of it, the political way. And we call that, it's like unreformable kind of things. So how do you reform the unreformable? We highlighted 4 things. One is that if you really want to really think reform as a one-shot solution or intervention, it won't work. It has to be continuous, which means when you make a law today, after 2 years, be sure that someone will find a good post in that law. And so what you need to do is, okay, there's a loophole. Continuously actually reform yourself too, so that you continue to block the loopholes, rather than you waiting until, like we have done from 2007 till now that we are thinking about reforms. I think that has exposes a lot of loopholes in the whole system, like I've highlighted in my presentation. So when we actually embark on this reform process, don't let us think about it as that we are going to get it right at once. We won't get it right at once. We will get it right over time. That's actually the first thing. The second thing is to ensure that when we talk about holistic and sustainable reforms, it has to be something that prioritizes institution than individual. We can have a good reformer. We have the Director General of Procurement Institutions who are great reformers. But what happens when we leave, right? What happens if people don't share our objective? But what happens if the institution we manage really share our objectives, so that everybody is just like, this is the rules here, this is the stated objective. So we need to actually really emphasize institutions than individual. And how do you do that? Maybe capacity development from institutions, whereby everybody shares the same goals, the same values around procurement. And so that even the procurement reforms It's not just driven by someone at the top alone, but everybody at the institutional level share that one. What else can we do? We could leverage on public will. Public will is the fact that we talk about political will being weak, but we also know that politicians want to win votes. And to win votes, you need public will, right? So could we actually use public will to really change political will? It's a question in terms of, can we put it as an agenda to say, okay, we will do this reform can be part of what we could do. How do we leverage that public will for political will? It should be something we should think about. But lastly, state level efforts are very important. As we have seen in Nigeria, even most of the reforms, some of the most beautiful reforms, are taking place at the local level. How do we ensure that we transfer that to the federal, but also share it among other states? Because the reforms taking place in Kaduna and Ekiti State, I want to say, it's still a small one compared to the 36 states we're talking about. So how do we replicate these good practices almost everywhere? It's also a question on our table for discussion. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Deji, for that interesting presentation. He really gave us a lot of insights. Please, one more time, a round of applause for him. There was honestly so much to grab. Before I'm done writing a line, he has come up with another line, and I was struggling to keep up. But the slides, if you're like me, the slides will be made available for you to go through. Just a few points. I love that he started with what the headlines are saying. I think at some point we just always revert back to communication, right? And how we should shift the perspective, not only with Nigerians, but also the information we're putting out there. Also the statistics. We saw the bar charts with the budget openness in Nigeria and South Africa from 2006 to 2021, the key performance on the three indicators of an open budget. We also saw the procurement value chain, the evidences and the challenges. And the challenges include insufficient political will and also the access to meaningful information. We saw the skills gap as well, put side by side, the demand and supply. And also he ended that powerful presentation by reforming the unreformable. I think that's quite an interesting way to put it. We should know that it would always evolve, the importance of the state level and leveraging the public. Powerful presentation. So please, one more time, a round of applause for Dr. Deji. Thank you. So we're going to be moving to the second panel session for today. And I'm going to take a back seat for this, and I'm going to have a chair. But please, if you can lend me your ears for a minute while I introduce the person moderating this. He's the Managing Director, African Project Development Center, APDC, Abuja, a youth-run organization for youth and women empowerment through training and incubation in agribusiness and creative arts. He is skilled in policy analysis, strategic planning, international development finance, and project management, program management. He served at AFDB for 21 years and retired in 2018 as the Director, Agriculture and Agro-Industry Department. He spearheaded the Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation, TAAT, and the Enable Youth Program, among others, which have brought many African youths and women into agriculture. He has a PhD in Development Economics from the University of Bradford, UK. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, taking us further as the panel chair for the next panel session, let us welcome the Managing Director, Africa Project Development Center, Dr. Chiji Ojukwu. Please, a round of applause for him. He will be introducing our panelists and moderating the panel session. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Ms. Eva, for that introduction. I also congratulate Dr. Deji for the wonderful presentation he has made this afternoon. I must also commend CC and partners for the timely study they've just done. I think it's coming at a time when I would say Nigeria really needs it. Good enough from the presentation, you said that the president is setting up a committee to look into some of these reforms. I believe the outcome of these discussions will fit essentially into those. I see them as what I call best practice, because from the presentation, it's obvious that Nigeria is not there. We have a long way to go, even when compared with South Africa. We are very behind. I'm also happy to know that some of the colleagues I work with at the African Development Bank are also here. I believe at a point they will also bring their own perspectives. When you compare what we do at international financial institutions to what is done at government level, there is still a lot of gap to meeting what I call best practices. Okay, if there is a traction towards these best practices, then this level of lack of transparency, corruption, and so on and so forth will reduce, and the country will be better for it. The amount of money that we are losing from what has been presented today, either from the first presentation or the second presentation, is very alarming. We're talking of trillions in a country that is suffering from extreme poverty. So I believe, as the professor said, if you get procurement right, then you get the country right. So this is coming at a time when it's very, very needed for this country to see how the reforms, if implemented, because from what we had in some of the presentations, it took about 7 years from when the World Bank intervened to when the Procurement Act was enacted. And procurement is dynamic, the market is dynamic. So as Dr. Deji said, you have to continue reforming. Don't just do one off and you think you've done it. You have to keep monitoring the market and see what changes that are needed. I think Dr. Eva has already, Ms. Eva already summarized the presentation, so I don't need to go into it, but let me invite my co-panelists to come and share their perspectives on this presentation. So can I call Daniel Kajan? Dr. Kajan is Senior Procurement Specialist at the World Bank. Please come to the podium. Okay, the second panelist is a colleague from Kaduna State Public Procurement Authority, the DG, Honorable Sanusi Yero. Please come to the podium. And our third panelist is also the DG, Ekiti State Bureau of Public Procurement, Honorable James Folorosho. Okay, I think you can agree with me that these panelists were the best we could get, given the topic that is before us, especially the reforms that are going on in Kaduna and in Ekiti states, and also a colleague from the World Bank that has funded most of these reforms or has played a big role and is still playing. So without much ado, I will ask each of you to tell us your perspectives with regards to the implementation and the findings and some of the recommendations. Let me start with our friend from the World Bank, Daniel. Thank
you. Okay. Thank you, colleagues. Good afternoon. For those who are fasting, it's part of the worship and Ibadah, isn't it? Yes, I'm happy to be here. In fact, it's a privilege because my colleague supposed to be here is in Tanzania, is SEAC. So he asked me if I'm available to come and represent the bank. I think the bank is interested in this kind of programs that are going on. And a confession, in fact, this is the first time I'm listening to somebody whom I have no one in procurement, who does not share my sentiment per se, but is talking about procurement. So I was getting the other perspective, how people see our work. So that's my first impression. So all the assumptions that I have, this is what people say and this is what they see. So my first impression is that the perception of the public in terms of procurement is very important and has been brought out in this research. So this is timely, and it will help in the practitioner to have a more, what will I say, direct approach to procurement issues in terms of the legal framework, in terms of the constitutional framework, and in terms of technology, because if you talk about reform, that's what it is, the legal framework, institutional framework, technology, and so on. So you have to get them right. So the research has brought out those issues. Although transparency is just picked as one of the core principles of procurement, the presentation has also dived into the other principles, indirectly and directly: economy, fit for purpose, open, fairness, all of these things. I think the presentation tried to capture all those things. Because you cannot do transparency alone. It's a behavior that you don't teach. It's a culture that is all encompassing. And it's not something that you can isolate. It is something that the quantum of it, what you see. What happens in life is a reflection of how transparent people are. The decisions that people take, even the decision that God takes, it depends on how transparent God takes decision. Because I've seen people challenging God in the decision that He takes. They say that God is not transparent. So, where I'm giving the example, I normally give an example to those people who attend my classes in the World Bank Procurement Clinics. For you that are Christians, you have a story where twins were born, Esau and Jacob, and they say that God has predestined and has chosen Jacob. Why? Instead of Esau, who was the firstborn. So people are saying, is God transparent? Why did he do that? Another one is that I was discussing with one professor of medicine of blessed memory, Professor Oshoteme, who was my boss in Dhaka. You know the issue between the Palestinians and the Jews. People are saying, why are they trying to use Bible to decide that case? Because there's no transparency. The Jews are saying that God gave them that land. They are now asking, was God transparent in choosing the land for these people? Why not the Palestinians? What I'm not trying to say here is that for you to know the magnitude of this topic, transparency is the quality of a decision, the genuineness of a decision, the genuineness of a people, the genuineness of a vision, not just about procurement, but ab initio, the genuineness of how you want to live your life is what we call transparency. So, and I think the presentation has dealt with that very well. Thank you very much. And I think
Thank you very much. Actually, the presenter has tried to do justice to the analysis. And as we are in the industry, the procurement agencies trying to analyze these issues and see the way forward. We really commend him for the analysis as well. And at least several things are on record. That now it's clear that we have the legal frameworks for us to operate in terms of the procurement. He's up to this, we don't have. So it's at least we have to note that and we have it. And then we also have the will from the political appointees, the governors and the rest. At least they have the will and they are trying to see. Of course, we can say the percentage is maybe not forthcoming as we want it, but at least there's that will. Nobody wants to be associated with corruption, So everybody wants to get money, but at least in a way that at least it will be clean to him, So that will is there, and then now here we are. We have operated the system for some time, and we need to at least do some amendments and then do some. So that this particular thing that he was able to put out of this assessment and the reports is really key to us. And I really commend him for that, and that's the way I saw it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I want to appreciate CC for having us here, and for all that we have gained today. Actually, there is a saying that says that the highest level of insanity is doing something the same way and expecting a better result. And all that we are doing concerning transparency, accountability, the level we are and where we are going.
Recording in progress.
Is just to make sure that we do things in different ways, so that at the end of the day we can get a better result that will get Nigeria out of this woods that we are. I will be ungrateful here if I don't appreciate my colleague from Kaduna, because I know that, as they are mentioning Ekiti, we will be nodding his head. Because actually when Governor Fayemi came on board, and that was in 2010, I was then a director of budget in the Ministry of Budget. I was the director of budget in the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning. And that was when he started directing us to Kaduna. And we were having a huge challenge in Kaduna. When they lost election in 2014, we went back to level 0. It came back again in 2018, we started. And that has brought us to where we are in Ekiti. And I know Kaduna will be very happy, particularly my very good parents. Because your guys are now saying they are coming to Ekiti to learn. And that is, we have taken what we learned to a very good level. And to that, I would say political will matters a lot. Governor Fayemi came from an environment where he has learned a lot of this, and he was not minding his words to link up us with those where we can gain maximally. And I want to say that for us to not continue to do things the way it is, sifters has equally come to help us. And I was very surprised. Actually, I just assumed office in BBP not quite a month. I was permanent secretary in the Ministry of Budget. Then I was moved to the Ministry of Finance. I retired last year. And then just about not quite a month, I was asked to take up this job. But you can see that the environment is not new to me, because the Bureau of Public Procurement is one of the fiscal coordinating agencies, and we all work together. And I want to say that if we want to get better results, we are not
look at how what happened. CC came to audit our performance by conducting the research, getting across to contractors, getting across to the women who are not even aware. And they got all the results and they felt, okay, for those who have been recommending it, they are not making mistakes. The point is that the sifters had actually helped us a lot also, change our perspective. And it's like in Nigeria, we will not do things easily. When sifters came and they have criteria, DLI 1, DLI 2, and all DLIs, and they attach conditions. Nearly all the states of the accreditation were keen to it. But go and see what is happening today. Majority of them are deviating. Immediately they got the money, they went back up, but our governor told us no. And the advantage of continuity has equally helped us. And that is the reason why we even come on board as the new DG. Because if it has been heavily politicized, I will be here. So I think these are some of the issues that we should bring on board to do things differently if actually we want to move ahead in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before I go to the next round of questions, let me also add a little bit of my own perspective. As you will have heard, I spent 21 years at the African Development Bank, rising from what we call tax manager. That's the field operations for 10 years, becoming a manager, becoming a director before retiring. So procurement, that period was also a major part of my oversight. As a practitioner in the field or approval process. I think listening to the presentation on transparency, one area that bothers me a bit is actually, are we really doing procurement? Okay. Especially, I think most of the discussion have been on budgets, but there's also projects. A lot of international financial institutions are financing projects. World Bank, African Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and all that. So, a lot of what we do, comes from those institutions, and most of them are through projects. Okay, so project procurement is as good as even the ones that the government is doing through project. But the question is, where do you start? It's a value chain. Sometimes we forget this. Okay, so if you are doing project procurement, for example, you must have a design in your project. That's where it starts. Okay. You design your procurement arrangement, you design your procurement plan, all in the project document during your appraisal. Okay. The issue of information has been raised today. Most of these things should be known. If you go to the World Bank or African Development Bank and pick a project there, you see all the procurement that will be done in the next 2 or 3 years. It's already there. So information is available. But unfortunately, here in the country, through our public procurement, most of these things are not known. One of the things said here is that 70% of procurement is done in, you say bedroom or bathroom, I didn't quite understand that. And I asked myself, is that procurement? Okay. So you have to have information available. Okay. You have to publicize. If it's international competitive bidding, you also have to publicize the international journals so that people outside there to know. Okay. Here today, we are talking of gender in procurement. We also have what we call domestic preference. Okay, so that opportunities are given to Nigerians to also participate, especially if they are complex projects. Okay, it's not every procurement that everybody should also be involved in, because they talk about NASA and so on and so forth. If we are to say construct underground rail station in Abuja today, it's not everybody that you invite. Okay, you also have what we call pre-qualification. You have to pre-qualify those who have the ability to do that job to bid, not just everybody. Okay, so there's a lot that is involved in procurement if we are to be transparent. Okay, the specification when the key speaker was talking about vehicles, it was interesting, because if you are going to procure and you want to be fair to everybody, then you must have specifications. You can't just say procure Toyota. Then people will bid for Camry, people will bid for people will bid for all sorts of things. So we must have clear specification that makes it that everybody is bidding for the same thing. If you don't have that, some will bidding for orange, some will bidding for apple, and so on and so forth, and it's not procurement. Okay. Today, I think when the professor was talking about giving contracts when there's no money to pay, it shocked me if that is procurement. Because once a contract is signed, the money is ring-fenced. You must have the money, and it's committed. Nobody should touch that money because it's committed. So how can you give a contract and then you say you don't have money to pay? That is not procurement. So there are many things I believe this study and the reforms that we're doing will bring up. And then you're talking about recourse. Okay? A minister goes to the site and he cancels a project because they are not meeting the deliverables. That is not recourse. The contracts that you sign must have process for dispute resolution, must have contract for arbitration, must have clause for recourse in case of any of the party breaches the contract. You cannot just arbitrarily cancel a contract. And then from what you said in the report, that people don't even know where to go to complain, as was done for the NASA case in the US. Okay? You just say, I can't fight government, and you just leave it. That is not procurement. A contract must have a clause that tells you where to go in the event that that contract is breached. And it's your right to do so. I believe that the reforms that are coming up will have all these things so that we try as much as possible to aim at best practice, which are internationally recognized and which will give confidence to various bidders to come to this country and participate. Okay. The issue of women was also raised. It's not part of the discussion, but broadly, let me use that opportunity to say my own. Okay. Affirmative action was mentioned. Okay. At the same time, if you really want women to participate, I think so the guy from Kaduna said it. If you say that this particular, you have to ring-fence the contract that you want women to participate and say that this women only contract. But in doing so, you must also have competition among the women. Otherwise, also, it's not fair. If you say these women and just go and select few women and give them the contract, that's not procurement. So the issue of what is procurement and what is not procurement, I believe, should be part of what this discussion should also be about. Having said that, I come back to the panel members.
Yes, I think.
Sorry, I have a question for you.
Okay.
I just made my own perspective.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Before I come to the work bank, let me go to Kaduna State. During the discussion, Kaduna is one of the states that is taking the lead in reforms, technology applications, and so on and so forth. How has it worked? How has this technology worked for you? Okay. And what are the challenges that the state has been facing in getting this right?
Well, thank you very much. As I said earlier on, Kaduna for long has been pioneering the issue of procurement in the country. We have been trying because we key in right from inception in 2007 during the beautiful budget implementation and price intelligence that was started in the federal level in 2003. So 4 years after Kaduna State joined in, and then we started. So we started with small guidelines and very little law that has about 9 pages. So we can see the trend in terms of the development that's occurs in the country concerning the procurement practice in the state, and also in the federation generally. What we got right was the political will right from the onset. When we started in 2007, I remember that was during the former vice president when he was a governor, Mohammed Sambo, who was the one that started the due process mechanism in the state. So, in part, his first appointee was the special advisor and chairman of the due process office then, to show how important he wants to get this reform right. So when we started, he could get us all the necessary support, right from the legal framework, all the documentation that we need to get in terms of the legal, the guidelines, the law, what there was, and then also the training started, because I remember all of us, about 10 of us, were sent to US that time to study and get the procurement right, because it was new then. So at least what I'm trying to say that we have come a long way in terms of keying into the best practice right from the time that Nigeria feels that yes, we need to have a reform around the procurement side. So that's why we have the political will, and then we are able to go ahead of all the states within no time, and then that's why we're also able to get the e-procurement ready for us, because we feel that we have gone past the manual processes and then we have to key in. And the most important secret is this capacity building that we've been doing, because within no time we try to educate our civil servants that are going to be the actors in terms of the procurement officers and all the MDS. So we try to do training and training for them. So within no time they were able to key into the procurement best practices, and also our contractors also do. We also try to have training and training. I remember that time, hardly a week passed without training. So that helps in terms of getting people on board. And as my colleague has said, as we're doing that, then the sectors came. That is also because it's a performance-based incentive program from all banks, so it really helped us. So Kaduna was able to get it right. One, because of the political will. Number two, because of the quick nature of the response that the state government took in terms of having to see that you're the key into the best practice in the procurement. And then lastly, they were able to get this capacity building very well for the staff that are operating the what you call Kaduna Public Procurement Authority at PPA, and also the other procurement officers around the MDS in the state. And it will be interesting to know that even our local government are fully key in. You can see how rotten the local government are, but in Kaduna State, they are really key in. In fact, just recently we finished what we call the procurement planning, procurement defense for all the local government, because normally when the budget is passed, all the MDS bring their procurement plan and they will come and do what we call procurement defense, because procurement is supposed to be often competitive. If you are doing any default, emergency, then you have to come and defend with facts why you want to do the emergency. And also, we are finished with the MDS in the state, and now we have just completed one for the local government. So it's really helping us. And the third thing is the issue of the data. We really have data right from 2007 up to date. So this helps us in planning and seeing monitor our progress. I think these are the few areas that make it a bit different from other states. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think the rest of the states have a lot then and get from the experiences that we have expounded. Now, let me go to our colleague from the Ekiti states. I will follow on the show. Though you are just 1 month, but you said that you already, you've been in the process, so you know what the government has done, what the people have done, you know the reforms that are going on in the state. Now that we're informed that the federal government is setting up a committee to reform the procurement system in the country, what are the suggestions? Of course, we've seen the 4 items of reforming the unreformable. Apart from those, what are the suggestions that you will be giving to this committee to ensure that they achieve the same level of success that we're seeing with Kaduna and the states? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, I would say that the starting point for the reform is a very strong legal framework. The Bible says that if the foundation be destroyed, what can the righteous do? And one of the things that Ekiti had done from the political we had and the continuity we're enjoying is a very strong legal framework. We identified the 8 stages of procurement. When we identified these 8 stages, particularly from the procurement planning, which actually links up all the agencies that are involved in procurement. We look at the needs assessment, feasibility studies, budgeting process, market research, and all that. Just at that planning stage, we move to what we call the tender notice. Then we look at the tender harvest. We look at the tender evaluation, approval of contracts, and contract formulation. We just look at those mileages that are involved. And we built the law, the enactment of the law around those stages. It becomes very, very comprehensive. And the legal framework was developed in not only in legal jargon that ordinary people cannot just read. The legal framework was brought to the level of everybody. So that is very, very important. In any reform, if the legal framework is weak, I think everything in that wise will be weak. So the reform should start with the legal framework and the simplicity of that legal framework. And also, I would say from us, the establishment of the procurement cadre. And I think that is one thing that, even though I'm not very conversant with what's happening at the federal level, but in Ekiti, the establishment of the procurement cadre has really, really helped us. And you could see Mrs. Ajibari coming here. She's at the director level. She's a civil servant. And look at how she spoke authoritatively on news, because they were brought up as a cadre and they were empowered. They were seeing the process of training and retraining them. So the procurement cadre must be distinguished. And like we have had there, in their set, we have to bring procurement cadre from the service, accountants, engineers, economists, and all that. But this time around, I think the federal government should be concerned at going into our universities and building a very strong curriculum for procurement, so that, coming into the procurement cadre could be well trained, particularly those who will start from level 8 to level 9, who will join the procurement and they have a longer year to spend on that procurement cadre and be able to impact the cadre. I think one thing that should already be done, which has equally helped us, is this portal, this online system that we're talking about. The SIFT has helped us in this, and like I said, we collaborated with other states who had gone ahead of us. The federal government should not shy away from learning from those states who are equally practicing. I think there was a time when we started also, the federal government budget would be passed at around April, May. And as at that time, we are following Kaduna's example, our budgeting process must start on the first day of the fiscal year. But thank God, because today the federal government is there. So they should not shy away from coming to learn from states who are performing. It's going to help the federal government a lot. These are others. I think if we can put this together, Nigeria will get it right. I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have a small follow-up question for you. When Dr. Abba was talking this morning, he said something about Minister of Works power not able to approve a single contract in a year, something like that. And I also heard about Mr. Wike also complaining about some of the rigidities of the procurement process. How do we get the balance? How do we get the balance between navigating through the various legal aspects and the efficiency required to finish that process so that the contract can move ahead?
It is because this law is made a human being for human beings. And if the political will is there, and there is a marching order, and there are posts with which this is a benchmark, that is the way we usually make it. But if the political will is not there, and somebody is coming from Mr. Presidency, you have a presidency that is stronger than the president, and there is a divided voice, and somebody is about to start something and they say, no, from president, this is what is coming, and then those who are to do cannot move forward. You know, that is having a dissenting voice when it is not necessary. But if the implementers are well tutored, sir, it is not necessary that we're having these drafts. And the point is that if the schedule had been distinguished, you know where I am, and like Governor Oyemi will always say, there is no silos mentality in my administration. If you are not ready to move ahead, I do somebody. But you know that the political will is there and is very straightforward. So the clock in the wheel of progress are the implementers. It's not the law itself, not the system. They are the implementers. They are the ones that are putting us into all this mess. But if the political will is there and the marching order has been given, and the law is written in a very simple manner that could be interpreted by Tom, Dick, and Harry, it's going to solve the problem. But the issue is that there should be education also. I believe the actors of this procurement should be well trained and be well tutored. Answer: there is a difference between doing e-procurement and e-pocketing. Yes, our governor was emphasizing on this from time to time. Those of you will be pretending as if you want to do e-procurement and you are doing e-pocketing. If I get you. So if we define that we are on for e-procurement, not for e-pocketing, there will be delays. Thank you very much.
Okay, to my friend from the World Bank. So far, we understand what the World Bank has been doing, the support it will give it to ensure that Nigeria gets it right. And the examples have emerged from what is happening in Ekiti and Kaduna states. So my question to you, what plans do you have to scale up this support to other parts of the country, other states? Or are you doing that already? If not, what are the plans to also make sure that these reforms and these innovations are also getting to the other states? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'll speak at length a little because of other, I don't know, it's a coincidence that I've been part of these reforms from 2000. Even all these laws they are talking about the state, we call them fourth generation laws. I was involved. All the states, 36 states. The project that is training procurement officers, I'm the tax team lead in the bank. It's the first project in the whole of Africa and in the bank to borrow money just for procurement. Number 3, the committee set up by President Tinubu to restructure the proper procurement law. I'm a member. We have done the first stage of the work. So at least as an insider, I should be able to speak and learn on what is going on. In fact, I want to start with the issue of the women in procurement. It took us 2 days to discuss what clauses should be in the corporate procurement law that will target women, gender. We received memoranda from many institutions that are dealing with gender on this matter. What we have done and what we are proposing is that we should have incentive in the law that will target women SMEs and women SMEs. Just like somebody said, it's not because you are a woman, but establishments that are managed by women something. And then CDDs, community-driven procurement that has to do with women. So just to assure people that that is being factored in the corporate procurement law under sustainable procurement. In terms of training, even issue of gender, the SPACEY project, I was just showing my senior colleague here, professor. In the program they are running in the 6 universities, they have DLIs. If they do certain things, they achieve. I was just trying to tell her, I showed her the letter we're writing to the Minister of Finance on part of the money that we're going to refund them as performance allowances, that about 3,000 women have gone through the training in this second batch of assessment. So those who are concerned about gender, about women, under the training is being done. On the issue of capacity building, because I'm responding to the presentation, there's already a platform like the 6 universities that are doing now. From track A. Track A is for people like PAMSEC, Minister, track B, and then track C is postgraduate, those who are more professional and then we have track E, the BAC, and then we have the other track, Masters and PhD, to have a faculty later. In fact, the project is supposed to close by October, but we are struggling because this track E to have our attention. You know, human capital development is very difficult. So, just to respond to the presentation, the legal framework that we raise, we need strong laws that incorporate this thing. The public procurement law is being reviewed and we're involved. And any resolution here will take it there. And for your information, this public procurement law, the states also tap from it. It's a reflection. So I think that angle is being done. Then institutional framework. This law, we have given a role to BPP as a regulator. We have observed that because these public procurement institutions, because of their doubling into implementation, there's no transparency. Just like the issue you raised. Because they just concentrate on no objection and so on, and the interest, like you said, the e-pocketing or e-procurement. What we mean by transparency is the interest. Whose interest are you trying to? Is it your interest or public interest? You already issue local content. Let me tell you, the local content issue that was signed by the president that left, Buhari, we had a serious debate with the Minister of Health and that local content. Because of that law, they wanted to go and buy bed nets just anywhere. Because of interest, self-interest. I can tell you that. And I saw it in the National Assembly. They are asking money that was borrowed about $300 million. Why has not been spent to buy the nets? I was a participant. It is because of self-interest. There was no transparency. We insisted there must be transparency in buying the bed nets. They say that because of local content, because of to encourage procurement in the country, they should go to one entity and buy the net of $50 million. Of course, that's not a transparent decision. That's not a decision that for sustainable development. So that's what we mean by transparency. This decision you are taking, this procurement method you are taking, this procurement plan you are making, sir. So people are making procurement plan. In the making procurement plan, they are seeing new houses, new Jeep for themselves. Is that transparency? Although a plan has been made, but is that transparency? So these are the issues. These are the issues. Okay. So to tell you that the Public Procurement Act, we are on it, and we are participating in it, and the training, the capacity building, we are on it, the Public Procurement Law on it, and the personnel. In fact, anybody going to work in the World Bank project in the future, either environment, procurement, project management, they have to pass through these institutions to be part of something. And for information, this program has certification portal, sir, the presenter. We want now to have certification of public procurement cadre. It's something that is going to be done. Just like you said, sir, we are growing. And those who are transparently involved, they are pushing it. But I can assure you, even in this, one day I was talking, I remember, there was a time we were talking, when we were having a review meeting. I said there was a contradiction in this basic project. We are talking about procurement standards, environmental standards, social standards. But so people are saying they want to procure procurement officers in the project. I say, you are a procurement expert training people. You cannot do the work. You want somebody to be hired. And he is saying if you should do the work, he should pay you. Is that transparent? So you see, these are the kind of issues that we need to confront. Transparency in procurement is a decision that is a way of life. It must start from the budget. It must start from what you think to do. Even the allocation of hospitals. When you are allocating projects, you may allocate the project to either a minister, to your village, not because of the contract that will go to it. So, sir, the question you are asking, the bank is supporting many reforms. We are going into the second generation reforms. As I was sitting here, I saw a mail. For our projects that are ongoing in the states, we are going to hire officers that can even help people sit with them to do procurement, so that procurement is not stored in the hands-on expanded implementation support. That means that a bank staff can go and participate in the procurement process and guide them. He will not take decision, but to guide them. We experimented during the COVID. During the COVID, I was in NCDC. Yes. During the COVID, I was in NCDC to help them in the procurement of all those things that they were doing, the isolation centers, all those requirements, medical equipment, and so on, from the bank fund. We had a pandemic fund, but that was accelerated and we were able to get those things. So I am not getting our checks from the bank. I'm a Nigerian. I'm also still a Nigerian. As to the best of my knowledge, I think we are pushing very well. And Professor is a product. She's working on this program and she's very excited about it. And I believe we are going to achieve sustainable procurement through transparent procurement. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you very much. Last word for each one of you, please. 1 minute. Following shot. Your last word, please. The topic or their last message.
Yes. What I want to say that the place of the NGO in ensuring that we get it right in Nigeria cannot be overemphasized. And this, I want to encourage the likes of the CSEA to strengthen it. Maybe by the time you do it, you'll be able to take the government movement to the right path. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Actually, my last word would be that we are really on track. Let's just continue hoping and see that we update the system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Daniel, please,
And that's what is that there's no side at all. So we should be working on fit for purpose procurement strategy in the country, leading to solve the problem that we say a minister could not award a contract for 1 year of this. It's because of the issue of fit for purpose. So we should be running towards fit for purpose and sustainable development through procurement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me hand over to the moderator.
Thank you. Please, one more time, a round of applause for our able chair and panelists. Please, you just have to stay put. There was something one of our panelists said that stuck with me. Transparency in procurement should be a way of life. Thank you. So I think we should all take that up. So we're going to have you can clap if you want to. So we're going to have a brief question and answer session before we go for our breakout session. Okay, so we have one here. Okay, another. So 3. Okay, yes. Forever hold your peace. Dr. Deji, you want to ask a question? All right, please, very briefly, because we're not trying to waste more time. So after this, we're going to have a panel session. Sorry, breakout session.
Good afternoon, Chairman and panelists. First of all, I want to say thank you to the organizers of this program. It's been very informative, and I really have a lot to take home to my organization. I am Mrs. Margaret Ekiti, Director of Procurement from the Federal Ministry of Communications, Innovation, and Digital Economy. Mine is actually a few comments and observations. I wish this program could last longer than this, where we, the operators, we in the field, can also have a say. Like Dr. Joe Abba said, a lot is being hyped, and some of the informations that are coming across about corruption and feeding our pocket may not be as true as they are sounding. Therefore, from MDA, I'm talking about the federal level, from MDA to MDA, the information that are available may be different. And now, for us, the operators, we do not only rely on the act, we have the manual, we have the regulations. And the regulations and the manual give explanation to what you have in the act. Therefore, when we talk about rigidity, the Procurement Act has provided for international competitive bidding process, national competitive bidding process, the selective or direct procurement process, and the emergency procurement. Now, the emergency and the restricted procurement process are like exceptions. When you justify it, you are able to justify. And the emergency procurement comes into act when you are able to justify the urgency attached to that procurement and the need for it at that particular point in time. It allows you to go ahead and buy those items and later come back and do the paperwork. And now in doing the paperwork, you are submitting back to BPP to also evaluate your pricing, whether it has been reasonable in the circumstance. And they have the power to review downward whatever pricing, if you are trying to take advantage of the situation that had arisen. So you see, the procurement process to me, yes, it has its own disadvantage. So like everything that you have in life, two sides to a coin, but it is the most transparent way of keeping record and accounting for government money that is being spent day to day. It is from the procurement processes that you can have all those records from the beginning to the end. And there is law there when you circumvent any aspect of it. But like in everything in Nigeria, well, whether the law is effective, whether the oversighting agencies are doing their work, that is another question altogether. And then there is a part I want to speak to my brother who is part of the reform. When the Procurement Act came into being, you must have money on the ground before you can start procuring anything by a procuring entity. Now there is circular from the Ministry of Finance, which now says their bottom cash plan. Now, that law seems to be saying that the money doesn't necessarily mean to be on the ground. Because now you have done your procurement, then you do your commitment, before you do the financial commitment, legal commitment, and all that, before the money is released to the entity. Whereas, if the money is not released, what happens to the consultant or the contractor that has provided services or goods or works for you? What happens to him? So you see, you have a circular which is now countering an act. So, sir, please, you may need to look into those circulars that are emanating from the Federal Ministry of Finance. Now, you also have another situation where they're talking about budget implementation plan. I have had some friction in my own ministry where I said, look, early in the year, the finance and account department wants to carry out their cash plan. And I said, no, this cash plan should be feeding from the procurement plan. So you cannot go ahead and do a cash plan without the procurement plan, the consolidated procurement plan of the ministry established and approved by the procurement planning committee. We had to argue back and front. What of a procurement officer who is not too vested with the law at her finger or his or her fingertip? They are endangered because they will overlook it and it will go on, because he had his own argument and I had my own argument. And at the end of the day, I prevailed. And I said, look, you are having a mere circular with you and we're having the act here. And it means that if you are allowed to do your cash plan, it means the ministry will be having 2 implementing documents. One is actually illegal because this one is driving from a circular. So, sir, you may need to look at these issues because, to me, the Federal Ministry of Finance is countering the Public Procurement Act of 2007 if we allow these circulars to keep coming. Then the other issue that I will quickly talk about is when we talk about specification. In our procurement processes, if you want to buy a vehicle, you can only give very unique specification that is leading you to whichever vehicle, but you are not allowed to mention the brand. It is at the point, it is when those bidders submit their costs and all that, they will be looking at it. For example, Nissan is different from Toyota. When you are looking at the specification, when you are looking at the engine components, you are looking at all the components holistically. Therefore, you are not allowed to say the brand, but you will make your specification that everybody in the motor industry can bid for. But at the end of the day, we are going somewhere without necessarily saying everybody should go to Toyota. I pray, my dear sister, probably when this type of program is being organized again, please allow us, the operators, to have a say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. While some want to leave, others think the time is not enough. Such is life. All right, so...
Excuse me. Okay. Let me, just 2 seconds, let me respond.
Okay, I hope it's 2 seconds indeed.
Yes. It's very important because, you see, the quality of the program. Let me start with the specification. This is a technical area that we may not discuss here. There are areas where you can mention a brand as equivalent because there are some that you cannot describe. And there are areas where you are going to frontline dealers, you can mention the specifications. That one we can deal with professionally. Now, the areas of these circulars, I'm happy. I say it's God providence that I'm here. I'm happy that the Minister of Finance is part of the committee. I said, I thank God, as small as I am, I sit with them. The Minister of Justice is part of the committee. I'm representing the country director. So that's what I need to have, become a big man. So it's genuinely, and anybody who has another thing, in fact, sir, the output of this workshop, if it could quickly be transmitted to us, so that it's something, because we are not finished, we have done the first committee work to go to the larger team to we look at, I think maybe, I don't know whether, I'll ask whether it is nice, maybe I can share what we have done with you. I'll ask the ethics committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure our communications team will work on making sure the outputs of this event is disseminated properly and as promptly as possible. So because of time, I'm only able to take 2 questions, sorry. So because you have spoken before, I would have to exempt you. So let me take from the lady on this side, and I think you put up your hand. Okay. So let me just stay here and then I'll come to you. We would still have more questions, but we'll do that maybe after, when we're done with the breakout session. We're still going to come and tell everyone what the output of that breakout session was. Then we can raise our questions, okay? Just to save time as much as possible.
Thank you so very much. And thank you so as during the kind of work we do, we've been able to reflect on the effectivity of the procurement itself. At times, because procurement, we overly talk about the regulations instead of the output. We build schools. Have that helped? What's the quality of the school? Because we recently did a procurement assessment across other states. And part of the point we saw a lot of gap is regarding contract management. How effective, how qualitative, and even the timeline. You have a project now, I can show you that a project that since 2015, it has not been completed. And it's there. Cost overrun, a lot of things must have happened. So could you please share how you are tackling that very key instance? Thank you.
Thank you. I do not want to cheat our young lady. We're so sorry. From here, I'll just go to you, and that will be all for now.
Sensitive.
Yes. Oh, but I mean, we had a lady. We had.
If you put all women who protest now.
No, please don't. Okay, so when he's done, we'll have the lady. I believe that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I came in late. My name is David Mwao. I'm from the African Development Bank. And we are involved in quite a number of projects being implemented in the country. And I'm also happy to be here with my colleague, Patrick Owori. I think he introduced himself earlier. So I just wanted to say something about the reform. I know World Bank is heavily involved in this, which is very good. We are leading the development partners on this. And I recall that last week we also had a meeting because we are doing an assessment, appraisal of a PBA, a program-based operation, and we had an interface with the Bureau of Public Procurement. And we talked about the ongoing amendments that are taking place. And I did actually ask that how will the states be able to tap into this? Because the amendment seems to be focusing only at the federal level. But a lot of implementation of activities is taking place at the state level. And it's good that we have two colleagues here from the state, Kaduna and Ekiti. And these are two that are represented. And each time we talk about best practices, we hear about Ekiti and we hear about Kaduna. What about Sokoto? What about Imo State? So I hope as the reforms are being amended, the law is being amended, the states will be able to key in into this and be able also to look inwards and see what they need to do. But I think most importantly, the reforms should be also based on an assessment of the systems, which I think you are very familiar with, assessment of the procurement system, so that you can be able to prepare a capacity development, program. And based on the recommendation, the findings and recommendations of an assessment of a procurement system, then you'll be able to see whether it will inform really on how best you can reform. And I would really want the states, interested states, to be able to come up to the development partners and ask if we can be able to support them in these activities. Personally, I'm involved in assessment of procurement system, and I was tasked managing the assessment of the Uganda National Procurement System, which has just been published. It was published last month by the MAPS Secretariat. So it is very important that an assessment is a comprehensive assessment that will inform, the amendments, the reforms that should take place. And of course, the comprehensive assessment will act as a baseline. And there are also what we call supplementary assessment, which looks into the different aspects like sustainable procurement, e-procurement, entity level assessment, professionalism, and public-private partnership. You know, there are tools which are being developed by OECD, and my colleague from the World Bank is aware of this. And this would really help for purposes of, you know, coming up with, reforming all the bureaus. Because my experience in this country has been that most of these bureaus are actually not doing what they're supposed to do. They are all involved in provision or giving no objections. And when you look at the thresholds really give the bureaus the autonomy in, you know, giving no objections. The bureaus should not ideally be involved in operations because that creates a conflict of interest. You cannot be a regulator and at the same time be also a player in the system. So I think this kind of assessment would be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that very insightful contribution. Okay, so in less than 2 minutes, we have...
Let me answer this because for the benefit of the people, please.
No problem.
It's very important to say that, one, this bill to be an executive bill is the president himself that is asking for this because he says he's finding difficulties implementing programs. But we are using that opportunity to bring all these things we are saying. You may not know, in 2012, we did a value chain analysis in this country. It was led by Madam El-Rufai. I worked with him. I was the counterpart from the World Bank. Madam is very interested in procurement before he became governor. So if you see him going about procurement, it's because we did a value chain analysis that the result was never published. Despite the fact Okonjo-Iweala was the president because of the findings. You know the political economy. But we are now using those things at least to improve on the law, just for a point of information. Number two, you know, we are running a federal system. In the law, there's a provision that says if you are using money that's up to 30% of the federation revenue or something like that, you have to adopt the national procurement law. But by the way, all the state laws are adopted from the federal law. So I think the state will key in. And finally, the issue of no objection. I can assure you that when we issued our first comment on the draft bill, somebody phoned me that they were looking for me. The Bureau of Procurement, the DG, they were looking for me to slaughter. Why we should say that this no objection is not their responsibility. So that is being taken care of. And I think I will discuss with Madam here to give me more wisdom on how to tackle that. Because if the bureaus are not doing regulations, they are doubling into implementation, there will be compromise and the thing will not work. There will be no transparency. Because you cannot do a research, you are doing a PhD, and you are the one who is clearing your proposal. It's not possible. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Victoria Namane from African Project Development Center. So I would say that the panelists have really done well when it comes to throwing more light on this transparency issue. But now I have a question, not just for the panelists, but to everyone who is here. How transparent are you? Because I believe you can't offer what you don't have. Charity begins at home. How different are you when you find yourself among those corrupt seeds during procurement? I think this is something that we really need to work on individually in order for us to create difference when it comes to procurement. And secondly, I don't know if it's okay for me to ask this question based on the gender responsive procurement. Now, we all talk about empowering women, bringing them into this procurement system. What are the ways, what are the steps that needs to be accomplished for a woman to be fit to accomplish this position? Because I believe procurement is a strategic and a very, very sensitive position. that it's not everyone that can handle it. So I want to know, and also, how do we intend to bring women into this procurement? Is it by organizing conference? Because I believe 95% of people in procurement are male. Why 5% are for female? Because maybe my gender thinks that this is a man's job, so they don't want to go into it. So I want to ask, what are the steps that needs to be taken for more women to come into procurement? Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, quite intriguing.
I will answer that. In the bank, my manager is a woman. So for the bank, 100% action have been taken. My manager is a woman. One of my colleagues, Barbara, those who work in AGI, they will see her, she's a woman. This madam is a director of procurement, is a woman. The first procurement due process, OB, was a woman. Bimbo Okusheto was a woman. So, well, how strategic our women are is what we're working on now. And in the trend they are making, there's a quota for women, isn't it? So I think steps have been taken. But I think what you're asking, that consciousness should continue. That's my own response to that question.
All right, thank you. Please, a round of applause one more time for our chair and our panels. Thank you, please.